Hi guys, I'm going to have you guys open up your Google Classroom to the Google Slides presentation called Totalitarian Aggression Prior to World War II, and we're going to go through these slides together. So the title is called Totalitarian Aggression Prior to World War II. The three major powers we're talking about here are from Japan, and that's Hideko Tojo, Germany, Adolf Hitler, and Mussolini, Benito Mussolini. And there's a quote from Mussolini that kind of summarizes all of their policies. It says, "For my part, I prefer 50,000 rifles to 5 million votes." They were all definitely willing to use military power to get what they wanted. The Axis powers. Even before Germany, Italy, and Japan formally made their alliance, they were motivated by a similar set of ideas. These included fascism, which you've already explored in our assignment we did before, totalitarian dictatorships, and the expansion of their borders, even through the use of military strength. Japan's totalitarian aggression came under the leadership of Emperor Hirohito. But as you guys know, Japanese emperors are basically figureheads, so he didn't have a lot of power. He was the face of the country. The real decisions and leadership came from the supreme military leader and eventually the prime minister, Hideko Tojo. And that's this guy over here in these little Harry Potter glasses. His goal was to expand Japanese borders through a program he dubbed the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere, which is a mouthful, or what I usually call Asia for the Asiatics. During the Meiji Restoration, Japan expanded its manufacturing and military presence. Because of this, they needed lots of natural resources. In the Sino-Japanese War, Japan had kind of put the Band-Aid on their need for natural resources by annexing Korea. Then they said, look at all these tasty neighbors nearby. They've already been imperialized by the West, but they've got lots of natural resources we want to use. So they kind of said to them, hey guys, you're weak, you're backward, you're already used to being dominated by outsiders. Wouldn't you rather be controlled by a foreigner that looks like you and has similar values to you and lives close to you, rather than a European or an American power? So they started their process of expanding their territory in Asia. And you can see on this map the Japanese expansion. 1931, they had kind of this dark stuff. By 1938, they'd taken over some of the kind of pinker colored. And then by 1942, they'd taken over pretty much all of Southeastern Asia. Italy was no different. Their leader was a prime minister from 1921 to 1943, so he was there kind of a long time. His name was Benito Mussolini. He had two nicknames. One of them was Il Duce. He did not like that one. It means the sweet face or the sweet one. And if you've ever had an Italian grandma or an Italian aunt come up and give you a big old squeeze on the cheeks, they thought he had a little baby face and they just wanted to squeeze out little cheekers. So they called him Il Duce, or the baby face, or Iron Perfect. That's the one he preferred. His political party was called the Fascist Party. I know you guys already did that in our assignment that we had earlier in this lesson. And the symbol of the Nazi or the Fascist Party, it's right over here, was this bundle of sticks kind of wrapped together with leather. The idea is that an individual stick could break, an individual person could easily be swayed to do something else, but if they're all working together, they'll stay stronger. His plan for expanding Italy's borders was motivated by Italy's hurt feelings from the Treaty of Versailles. They felt that at the end of the war, they didn't get as much land as they deserved out of Germany's losses. They also were motivated by recreating their historical greatness, the greatness that had been the Roman Empire as it dominated all of Europe way back in the day. They also named their program the same as the Roman Empire, the Mar Nostrum. And if you take Spanish, you know Mar means we, and Mar means sea, and nosotros means we or us. It means our sea. Nosotros, our, Mar, like the Marines or a marina, sea. Germany's totalitarian aggression came from, as you can imagine from last week, Adolf Hitler's leadership as he rose up through the ranks of the Nazi Party and then through Nazi government. Remember, he did all this through democratic means. And by 1933, with the signing of the Enabling Act, he had complete power over Germany. One of the Nazi Party's platform tenets was this idea of the leader principle, or the Der Führer principle. His nickname was Der Führer, or the leader. This is a reflection of his idea that everyone has to have complete obedience to the will of the leader. Don't mess with me. I'm going to turn this light off. There we go. Another policy that Hitler was promoting, besides the Der Führer policy, was called Lebensraum, or living space, or I often think of it as elbow room. He felt that the Germans were such a great people, such an important set of ideas and accomplishments, that they needed room to spread out. They also needed to unify all German people under one true German leader. So he looked around Europe, people he wanted to take over. You. And while he was pushing across borders, normally seen as an act of war, the rest of the European powers just kind of sat there and said, oh, all right, I guess you can have it. This policy is called appeasement, when you give in to an aggressor's demands to avoid war. Like if you ever babysat a kid and they're like, oh, I want a lollipop, even though it's like almost dinner time, and you give them the lollipop just to keep them from screaming their head off. Same thing. They were giving Hitler a lollipop. And you can see this cartoon, Lebensraum, living space. I need all of Europe. So there's a number of events in this totalitarian aggression. We start really early in the 1930s. In 1931 and 1932, Japan had been living in Korea, had taken over Korea back in 1904, but they wanted more land, so they took over Manchuria. Manchuria is a naturally resource-dense area in northeastern China. It's also a Chinese province. It isn't part of China proper, and Japanese took it over pretty easily. League of Nations sat there and, oh, there goes my dog barking at a neighbor. League of Nations sat there quietly and said, okay, I guess you can have it. My dog, poor guy. And they didn't do anything. This is a reflection of Asia for the Asiatics. In 1935, Italy invaded Ethiopia. This wasn't because Ethiopia was even close to the Mediterranean Sea. They just wanted to be able to practice their techniques, practice their military strategies. They also wanted to try out a new piece of technology they've been working on called the flamethrower. The League of Nations again did nothing, and again it's a reflection of Mare Nostrum. In 1936, Germany started to break the Treaty of Versailles. They remilitarized the Rhineland. The Rhineland was that little buffer zone set up between France and Germany, so they'd never have to worry about Germany invading France again. They invaded the Rhineland, they put their military there, and the Allies did nothing. They appeased Hitler once again. They gave in to him to avoid a war. The League of Nations did nothing. And again, this is a reflection of Lebensraum, or Germany's need for more living space. In 1937, Japan invaded China proper. They went from just having Manchuria to taking over real Chinese land. China asked the U.S. and Britain, hey, can you guys help us, please? These guys are invading us. And China and Britain and the U.S. gave them, like, a couple of crumbs of cash and maybe 2 or 3 bullets and maybe a box of Cheerios, but nothing more than that. One of the interesting things about this is in 1937, China was already in the middle of a civil war. But just like when someone says something mean about your sister or your brother, you can say mean things about your sister or brother. The Chinese knew we can have a civil war, we can fight each other. But as soon as somebody else steps in and says something mean about your sister or brother, you're going to throw some hands. China was the same way. As soon as they were invaded by an outside force, the communists and nationalists, the two sides of the Chinese Civil War, looked at each other and said, well, we're going to put our fight on pause, and we're going to fight against the Japanese. Again, this is a reflection of Asia for the Asiatics. In 1938, Germany, Hitler invaded Austria. Austria was supposed to have an election where they got to vote on whether they wanted to join up with Germany. They probably were going to join up with Germany. There were a lot of people who were very loyal to Hitler. Hitler was born in Austria. They liked this idea of redemption for what happened to them during World War I. But Hitler decided, counting ballots is such a bore. Wah, wah. Let's cancel the election and let's unify with Austria. This is called the Anschluss, or the Union. The union between Austria and Germany, however, was spelled out in the Treaty of Versailles. It said they cannot be unified, and yet they unified. The Allies, especially Britain, again, did nothing. They appeased Hitler. They gave in to him to avoid a war, and the League of Nations did nothing. Then Hitler, a couple of seconds later, demanded a chunk of land called the Sudetenland. The Sudetenland is a little slice of Czechoslovakia where they speak German. Hitler invaded. The Allies, especially Britain, did nothing. They appeased Hitler. They gave in to him to avoid a war. The League of Nations did nothing. And again, Hitler was looking for Lebensraum, or living space. Shortly after this, there was a meeting called the Munich Conference. Oh, did I skip a page? I'm sorry. I hope I didn't. Oh dear, I may have skipped something. Eventually, like minutes later, after taking the Sudetenland, Germany said, we don't really want just the Sudetenland. We want all of Czechoslovakia. And that's kind of right here. In September of 1938, Germany, Italy, France, and Britain all sat down and said, all right, Hitler, you can have Czechoslovakia, but if you do one more thing, you're in big, big trouble. They kind of sacrificed Czechoslovakia to the Nazis. And the Czechs were just like, are you kidding me? We don't want to be taken over by this jerk. The major player in this was a man named Neville Chamberlain. And when you see Neville Chamberlain in cartoons or in videos, he's always dressed as really properly. He's usually wearing his little tie, and his collar's always popped a little bit because it's 1938. And he's usually wearing a bowler hat and carrying an umbrella. So you're going to see images of him a little bit later looking like that. When you get to this point, you're going to play this video at the bottom. It features one of my little history teacher boyfriends. He's going to sing a song, an Ariana Grande song that he rewrote about the Munich conference. And he's a pretty good singer. He's not great, but his production value is top notch. You're going to love it. I love it. Mrs. Carnes, you're going to love it. In 1939, Italy continued with their totalitarian aggression and invaded Albania. The League of Nations did nothing, a reflection of Mare Nostrum. And then something really kooky happened. The whole world was like, what the what? In August of 1939, right after the Munich conference, right before the war really starts up, Hitler and Stalin agreed to something called the Nazi-Soviet 10-year non-aggression pact. This was a 10-year agreement to never fight against each other. It is what Mary Poppins would call a pie crust promise. It was easy to say, oh yeah, we won't fight each other for 10 years. But it could break apart really easily. Easily made and easily broken. The two guys who hammered it out were called Molotov. He was the guy from Russia. You might recognize the name as a Molotov cocktail. Something that blows up in your face. And Ribbentrop. He's the German who hammered it out. This was an agreement between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union to not fight each other for 10 years. There are parts of this agreement that are spelled right out on paper. There are other parts that were a little less apparent. One thing, like we've said 3 times, Germany and the USSR won't attack each other for 2 years. A second thing, Germany and the Soviet Union would split Poland if Germany happened to invade it, which it will in about 2 minutes, between the two of them. And Germany would have access to the Soviet Union's natural resources and natural materials. They could sell them to the Nazis and make some money off it. The unspoken parts of this agreement are down here where these squares are. The Soviet Union knew they were not ready for a war. They knew it was coming. Germany and the Russians hate each other. Fascists and communists hate each other. You saw that in our last assignment. Germany did this to avoid a two-front war for a while. And you're going to watch this really quick video at the bottom that spells that out. Shockingly, Hitler could not be trusted, and on September 1st, 1939, Germany invaded Poland, looking for Lebensraum, looking for living space, breaking the Munich Conference, which had just ended in August. This was the final straw, and on September 3rd, 1939, Britain and France jointly declared war on Germany, and World War II began. And you're going to watch this video. I have already recorded, and you have a lesson or a little assignment you're going to do comparing Hitler to this jerky little mouse from that book. You probably remember this book when you were little. If you give a mouse a cookie. In one of the assignments in this week's lesson, you're going to see me read this book to you, and we're going to do a little activity that goes with it. So I often think of Hitler as being just like this bratty little mouse, and you'll see why in the assignment. I will see you guys soon. I miss you all. Goodbye.